So, hello everyone, welcome back to our new podcast. And today here we have is Marcus from BlueBerryFunded. So, hey Marcus, how are you doing?
Good, thanks. It's good to be here. I'm excited to have a good chat.
So, guys, Marcus is the general manager BlueBerryFunded, and Marcus is currently managing the launch of Blueberry. So, we are very excited to share very much insider details about BlueBerryFunded, what things are going to come, what are you going to get. So, keep watching till end, and you will get to know a lot about BlueBerryFunded, why are brokers going into the prop space, and many much. So, Marcus, can you please give some details about yourself before we begin?
Yeah, sure. My name's Marcus. I've been in the CFD industry for about 8 years now. Most of my background is on the brokerage side. So previously, I really specialized in operations, liquidity, general operations of brokers, and
Mhm.
technology, things along those lines. I got thrown into the prop space kind of by accident, for better and for worse, a few years ago. The broker that I
Yeah.
was working at, we had a lot of partners coming in needing infrastructure, trading platforms, sort of
Mhm.
advice on that area, for prop firms. And we decided to take a stab at it, and we dove in. And that
Yeah.
skyrocketed quite quickly. Ended up working with 30 to 40 prop firms on
Mhm.
that side, and it consumed my whole life. And then, from there, I then went into direct consulting, white labeling, and technology for prop firms for around a
Mhm.
year. Worked with another 30 to 40 prop firms of different sizes, locations. Was a real eye opener into the more direct
Yeah.
operations of prop firms. And
Mhm.
from there, I've now come over to Blueberry Funded to help Blueberry Markets launch their own broker-backed prop firm,
Yeah.
and deliver a greater sense of trust and sustainability to the space, which is,
Mhm.
in my opinion, very much needed right now, and I'm sure you'd probably agree with that as well.
Yeah. So, and Marcus, there are, I believe, 40,000 plus forex brokers. So, how many platforms do you guess are exist? They exist in our industry.
How many prop firms, like in general, or
Like in general, how many platforms do you think exist in our industry, as according to you, as per your
uh,
analysis?
well, see, I know you know the answer because you've web scraped like the entire universe of prop firms. But look, my guess is around 300. But in terms of major operating ones, maybe 100 that are like serious contenders. But
Yeah.
that's, again, I know it's a generalization.
It's more than 500 currently. 520 firms, prop firms in the
Okay,
industry.
so I was off by about 200. Okay, but
Yeah,
but still a lot less than there are brokers, which is really interesting.
but I don't think so because even if you see, it's like 40,000 brokers, so it's like 1 2% almost 1.5%. So I think the numbers will increase. I believe it's gonna touch like 1,000 by the end of this year at least
Well, that's
because
the thing, is like we've gone through so much, like in the last 6 months in the prop space. There's a lot of that,
yeah.
like that cycle of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And people bring up on Twitter, oh, prop firms over,
Mm,
what's happening to props? And it's like, the total addressable market of prop firms is like what, 1.5, $2 billion a year in
yeah,
total of sold evaluations. Like, and if you look at how many broker deposits there are out there, it's multiples of that. And I think what you've
yeah,
just pointed out confirms that as well, is in that there's what, 500 prop firms, give or take, and 40,000 plus brokers. Now, I'm
yeah.
not going to say that prop firms are going to match brokers tomorrow or anything, but like I think we're going to see a lot more growth because the product itself has value. I think
Agreed.
the last 6 months has shown that, because like everything that's gone through in the last 6 months, like we saw brokers go through 10, 15, even 5 years ago, when it comes to changing regulations, changing technology, changing payments, the
Yeah,
culture of trading changing. Brokers have gone through all of that, and even when props started to get big originally, on the broker side, we were saying the same
yeah.
thing. We're saying regulation's going to come, platforms are going to be harder to get,
Mm,
and it's going to go through some disruptions. It's only natural.
yeah,
So we're seeing prop firms go through that now, for the first time over the
yeah,
last 6 months. And so, in my opinion, it's like if they've been able to sustain or survive through that first period of uncertainty, like after all these firms have gone down, platforms have been
yeah,
banned, all of that, I think it means traders like the product for what it is. Like,
yeah,
the idea of being a funded, career trader, the sort of the value add of prop trading in
Hmm.
terms of the amount you spend for the capital and upside you can get if you're successful.
I,
I think that has legs, and I think like that shows that there is longevity in this space.
yeah. Over the last few months, like over the last 6 months, I have seen like more than 25 plus prop firms going down, and these are the ones that were popular. But if you ask me about the firms that were not popular, I have seen like more than 100 firms that are gone over the last 6 months. And out of that, like most of the firms give the only reason that due to regulatory restrictions we are going down. you know so do you think this is something really like a genuine reason, like, because let's be honest, there is FTMO, there is fires, there is my funded effects. They are operating, right, they are doing millions in revenue. We have funding pips, they are doing millions in revenue, and then we have a new firm that comes out and says we are closing down because of regulatory issues. So do you think, is there any genuine issue, or that's just another reason firms are using to close their operations?
Well, look, regulation is definitely going to be a thing. Again, like I've spent a lot of time and a lot of money on legal advice around what could prop regulation look like, and I have just as much information as before I spent that money, which is we just
Yeah,
don't know. Don't get me wrong, I'm being a bit sort of cynical about it, but that being said, like there will be some form of regulation come at some point based on the growth and sort of the responses we're now seeing from some regulators over in Europe. So it's going to happen, but I don't think it's kind of like the issue some people project it as. I mean, look, coming from sort of a brokerage experience and running a broker backed firm, we sort of see it if it comes under the same sort of guise as current CFD brokerage regulation. Look, that's something
yeah,
we understand. It's something we have experience with. It's something we know how to work with. And so I don't, from my perspective, see it as a huge roadblock. Other people that maybe have no experience in it or, have never gone through the process of getting a license in certain
mm-hmm.
regulatory jurisdictions, I can understand why they might be scared. But I think some people do make it into a bigger deal than it needs to be.
Yeah,
But that being said, I think the real problems with regulation aren't so much just the licensing that might come from it and that process to get that. It's from
mm-hmm.
what I've seen in like the world of brokers, it's everything else that comes with it. I think it's what happens after you get a license in that. Because look, once you get the license, obviously you have a lot of ongoing compliance reporting and
Yeah,
things like that to do. Again, I have experience in that. Blueberry has a lot of experience in that world. So I wouldn't
yeah,
say that it's something that scares us. But what a lot of firms I think should be worried about is once you get licensed, your ability to market the brand that you present to the world, the messaging that you put out comes under a lot more scrutiny and there's a lot more rules around it. And I think a lot of the prop
mhm,
space, I always say to people, like one of the best things about the prop space is that it's an e-commerce user journey. It's something
yeah,
everyone can understand. It's simple. The worst thing about the prop space, it is treated purely as an e-commerce journey by a lot of people that run prop firms. And that's the
yeah,
issue is a lot of people, and you've seen it, a lot of people have built prop firms. You said it yourself, there's been a few hundred spring up, and that's because it's quite cheap and easy to start one. A lot of these firms, they do acquisition through purely performance marketing and that. And it's very simple to do that right now. There's
yeah,
not as many restrictions as there are in other industries. And
yeah,
so I know that once licensing and regulation becomes a thing, that those firms, if and they exist, the ones who 80-90% of their traders that come in are through just performance marketing. As soon as that
yeah,
performance marketing goes, then
mm,
a lot of their sales are going to drop. Very similar to when a lot of firms lost platforms earlier
yeah,
this year. And the funny thing is that I speak to a lot of them saying, "Well, aren't you worried?" And they'll say things like, "Oh, well, no, because I just can just go get like a grey hat sort of ads account from somewhere, and I'll just run all my prop firm ads through that, so
mm,
I'll be able to circumvent regulation." And it's like, well, it's not that easy, or else brokers would have been doing
I
that for
agree,
a while. And they
I
used to
agree,
try that, and then they weren't allowed to do it anymore. So I
yeah,
think it's one of those things where I think when you come purely from an e-commerce background, you think there's just some simple hack to getting around everything. When
yeah,
licensing regulation comes in, there's no simple
and
hacks to things.
I
You have
agree,
to do things the right way, and you need to be
mm,
prepared for that.
yeah. But I think, just like many brokers went offshore, like 99% of brokers are offshore and not even regulated. So even prop firms will go offshore once the regulatory body comes in.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the other way around it too. That the other way around regulation is you just go offshore. But even offshoring isn't a silver bullet. Like you might avoid having to get a license, and you might avoid doing all this compliance work and things like that. But
Yeah,
your marketing is still going to be very limited in who you
agreed,
can market your product to, and payments are
agreed.
going to get quite a lot harder.
Yeah.
That's something that I think is another sort of elephant in the room that I know from the broker side is, doing payments in offshore jurisdictions can get quite, it's an interesting space to say the least. And I think a lot of prop firms that are used to plug and play providers, when they go
Mhm.
into that world, they're in for quite a shock. I'll say that. So
Agreed.
even if you are planning to offshore your business entirely, um, I think there's a lot of other things to take into consideration. Again, there's no
Yeah,
one size fits all hack. There's pros and cons to each method you decide, to run your
yeah,
business with. And I think prop firms need to look at it from all angles when making those decisions.
agreed. And why did Blueberry decided to jump into prop firm space
Well, BlueBerry, already was in the prop space. For a long time they were doing a
as
lot
a
of
broker?
infrastructure. Yeah, as a
As
broker, providing platform infrastructure,
Mhm,
trading infrastructure, liquidity to prop firms. Now,
mhm.
for obvious reasons, a lot of that sort of went in different directions earlier this year. But
Yeah,
look, they've always kept a keen eye on the space. Um, and wanted to re-enter it in some way. I've always been a big advocate for the last 12 months of broker-backed prop firms.
yeah,
For a long time, I've sort of been banging on the wall saying that we're going to see prop firms become brokers and brokers become prop firms. And now in the last few
it's
months, we've
happening.
seen FTMO go get a license. We've seen the brokers, a lot of brokers in the space start prop firms. And
Yeah,
the reason for that is a brokerage is a great vehicle to bring this space into the long term to make it sustainable.
yeah,
Like I said, for what we're just talking about, that it's very likely this space will get regulated. So if you already
they,
understand regulation or you have a license, you're in a very good place to, then continue with your prop business operations. Very
yeah,
similarly, when you own your own trading infrastructure, you have access to top tier liquidity, which usually you can only get if you're a licensed regulated entity. You have a lot more control over your business, and it reduces costs over the long term and gives better conditions to the downstream traders. So it's something I was big on for a long time, and I think after sort of having some good chats with the guys at Blueberry Markets, seemed like a very good move
yeah,
to make, and that's sort of the direction we've gone in because I think that there's a lot of things happening in the prop space right now, but I think broker backed prop trading is the future, and
yeah,
I think Blueberry is a great brand to take that on. And again, it's not about just saying putting a brand out there and saying, hey, we're a broker doing a prop firm now. Because I've
yeah,
spoken to a lot of brokers out there that I think that is their mentality that, hey, they already have a huge client base, they're good at running a broker, so they should just put a prop arm on their company. But the
yeah,
thing about that is that, and what we want to do with Blueberry Funded is we want to really meet in the middle. I think what brokers are good at a lot of things, like I just said, they're
mhm,
good at regulation, compliance, trading infrastructure, liquidity. They're good at items like this, but there are things that props are naturally really good at too. It's the things that really drew me to prop firms in the first place. They're really good with social media. They're good at community management, running discords, and I feel like they're a lot more in touch with the trading community, which I think is really important to bring on that feedback to help build and improve your product and services. So, I think the goal here wasn't just to take the brokerage and say, hey, we're a prop firm now. It's to sort of build this sister entity that can do already what props do really well, but put behind it the sustainability infrastructure of a very well established broker that's been around for 8+ years and serviced over 50,000 active traders on the brokerage side. So that's sort of our vision and mission, with doing this for Blueberry Funded. Sorry, I feel like I just went a bit a
no
bit off
worries.
topic. If I ran
No,
too much, just let me know. As you
no,
can tell, I
that's
have a tendency to just
no
talk
worries.
quite a
That
lot.
there's quite lot of information. You are providing the value. So, why, like, I believe brokers are the one who are going to shape the future of the prop industry. Like, many firms laid the foundation, but I believe brokers are the one who will shape the future. And I believe this is going to be, like the one who are very consistent with their trading. It is going to make them richer very sooner. Like, they can scale up to 5 million, $10 million in prop firm, with the help of prop firms. And I don't think so, like, it was possible before, or this kind of opportunity will, it was existing till before that. So, well, why do you think, like, you said, like, Previously, many brokers were hesitating to come into the prop industry, prop space. So, is there anything else that brokers are seeing aside from
Well,
profits
it's
or
interesting.
growth?
'Cause people always ask me because back in the day, like again, like the broker I was at the time, we were one of the only people that actually wanted to take on props, and even that was a bit of a gamble. Again, we wanted to try something new. And at the
Mm-hmm.
time, a lot of these people were messaging me saying, want to start a prop firm, need some infrastructure, need platforms, liquidity, things like that. And look, I knew
Yeah.
FTMO at the time, but I didn't know a lot about the prop space in general. And
Mm-hmm.
I did a massive deep dive into it, and I really loved what I saw. Like I said, it was really community driven. It was very organic and authentic, and it still is a lot. I love the Twitter space. I love the Discords. Because usually a lot of the time what you see in the trading space is these products and things that are really, I guess, forced on traders by brokers. It's just a PR thing or something like that, but no one's asked for it, no one really wants it. But what I loved about props was it was coming from sort of the ground up. It was
Yeah.
sort of like grassroots, almost like this organically grown product, that were coming to brokers saying, hey, help us build this, like people want this. And the
Yeah.
funny thing at the time, and I always say to people, was that appealed to me, and the other thing that appealed to me a lot was that brokers really hated it. Like everyone in the brokerage space I talk to, and I'm like, hey, what do you make of this prop trading product? They're like, oh, we hate it. We think it's a scam. We don't like it. And the real reason they probably thought that was because they didn't think of the idea first. It's
Yeah.
kind of like the changing of the guard. Like when a lot of
Mm.
the white label MT4, MT5 brokers started getting big a decade ago, all the established
Yeah.
players in the market were saying, oh, they're all these, dodgy actors springing up. They don't know what they're doing. And now we
Mm.
fast forward 10, 15 years, and brokers are saying the same thing about prop firms. But
Yeah.
yes, I think brokers really sat on the fence for a while for it to see
Mm-hmm.
like the proof of concept to an extent. And I think the last 6 months, as I said earlier, that's been shown in that there was a bit of an industry meltdown. Firms went
Yeah.
down. A lot of firms, I guess, didn't know what they were doing when it came to managing risk and understanding platforms and a variety of things. But
Yeah.
then we've seen people still interested in prop trading. Even after
Yeah.
all of that, people still love it. And I think brokers are looking at that saying, oh, okay, this product does have legs. It's here to stay.
Yeah.
The industry is in a bit of turmoil. Now's our chance to dive in. So I guess that's why brokers have come around to it a bit. But also the
Mm-hmm.
other reason, and I think I realized this really early on, is that look, I don't see brokers and props as like or products. I see them as and products, like they complement each other. Like
Yeah.
if you're someone who only has $100 to trade with, it probably has a lot more value for you as a trader to take
I
a
agree.
prop challenge, hone your trading skills, pass the evaluation, and get simulated capital with which to trade. And
Yeah.
if you're making 5% a month or something, as an example, making 5% on a simulated funded account has a lot more value than $100 in a brokerage account.
I
Vice
agree.
versa, like if you're someone with a lot of personal capital at a broker, you've got five, 10 plus $1,000 at a broker, and you just keep blowing up accounts because you don't know what you're doing. It actually might be more valuable for you to take a step back, do a prop challenge where you're trading
Yeah.
within certain parameters. There's an educational component to it that's very valuable. And likewise, the goal of any trader long term is to trade your own capital. It gives you more
I agree.
flexibility and more control. But some people don't have that capital to start with. So what you'll see a lot of the time is someone will get one, two, three payouts, and they'll take that money
Yeah.
and then they'll put it into their brokerage account. So
Yeah.
I kind of see it as an extension of the trader's journey, and it makes sense for
Yep.
brokers to want to capture as much of that journey as possible. Because really, if you're running a broker, let's say someone
Mm-hmm.
does that prop challenge, they get a few payouts, then they say, okay, well, where am I going to trade with now? If I
Yeah.
open a brokerage account, if the broker was the prop firm, they're happy there because they've had sustainable payouts, good conditions. They're probably
Yeah.
going to keep trading with you, and you're going to be able to retain that client, and be part of their trading journey and life cycle for a lot longer. Um,
Yeah. So.
and so that's kind of my view on it, as to why
Mm-hmm.
it's a very beneficial thing for brokers to do, if they do it right, as I said, though, because I think a lot of them think that if they're good at running a broker, they'll be good at running a prop firm. But there's a
It's
few
not.
parts of that equation that I think brokers don't know yet, don't understand,
Yeah.
or have lost their way in a bit. So, but we'll
Mm-hmm.
see all of this unfold, I think. And
Yeah.
again, like I said, brokers they're better for the space long term. So I'm keen to see more enter,
Mm-hmm.
as well.
So, what makes Blueberry Funded different compared to other broker backed firms? Like, what's the major difference?
Look, I think it's because we're approaching it from both angles. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's that, we're not just, it's not like a broker said, we're just opening up a prop business, slapping that, funded under their title and then releasing it. I think it's something we're looking to do quite properly. I think, I've been brought on board. I have experience in both the broker space and around
Mm-hmm.
3 years of experience in the prop space, both on consulting, technology, and on trading infrastructure. So in that sense, we're not looking to be a broker doing a prop firm. We're looking to take the best parts of what brokers do well and combine it with what prop firms do well to be the best of both worlds. And I think that's what's going to make us different to a lot of brokers just taking a stab at the prop space. We want to be very
Yeah.
community focused in how we run our social media and our Discord. We want to take on a lot of feedback from traders. I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
brokers usually like to exist with a bit of anonymity. They like to be behind closed doors.
Yeah.
Even when I've been on the brokerage side, even though I was in like the ops space, risk side, you're usually meant to be, kept in the dark corner and not talk to clients. I always love talking to clients and, take on
Mm-hmm.
feedback, because at
Yeah.
the end of the day, like when you're the one sort of, running liquidity, running infrastructure, your clients are going to be the people that are going to tell you if you're doing it right or wrong. And it's sort of the
Agreed.
same thing with how we're running the prop firm. Like, we're going to go
Mm-hmm.
live with our, in about 2 days from now. And, we're going to have, a range of challenges, evaluations that we think are quite competitive, but at the same time, very sustainable and risk adjusted compared to a lot of other, race to the bottom pricing we're seeing in the space. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are going to be happy with it, and a lot of people might find it a bit too conservative. But
Yeah.
also, I think the main point is that it's sustainable, and that's important. But let's say we go live and we're going to get a lot of feedback on it. Maybe there's things traders like, don't like. And if there's a way
Yeah.
that we can offer something in a risk adjusted and sustainable way, I want to bring it to market. I don't want to, the challenges and how we run the business on launch isn't going to be the same one
Yeah.
week in, 2 weeks in, or a month in. It's
Mm.
we want to be very feedback oriented, which is an important thing for me.
Agreed. Mm. And by the way, do you know what happened to my forex funds and why it happened to my forex funds, and not any
It's
other
change.
broker,
It's
any
a
other prop
change
firm?
of pace. Well, yeah, it's funny you say broker then prop firm, because that was the question around my forex funds. It's like, which one was it? And look, I think there's a myriad of things there. And look, everyone's heard the story a lot, but the thing that I always found interesting was, so look, we know that these guys had a lot of money, like
Mm.
over what
Yeah.
200 million in the bank. They were very, very cashed up, very liquid. But what I
Mm.
find so funny was that when they decided to open this brokerage arm of their business,
Mm-hmm.
that for a company that had that much money, I can't believe they got it so wrong. In that you could go to like the most low cost offshore forex, legal consultant on the planet, and they will say to you, if you are going to try and circumvent the law and take US traders onto a brokerage setup,
Yeah.
run it offshore or something like that. I mean, and you should never do that in general. That is like,
Yeah.
entirely wrong on so many levels. But if you are going to do it, and, go do it offshore or something. And what do?
Mm.
They open up a brokerage onshore to take US traders. And where do they open it? In the US and
Yeah.
Canada. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's literally the cardinal sin of like the FX space is like, you don't take
Yeah.
US traders. And the few dodgy people who do, they do it offshore. And they sort
Yeah.
of failed on those fronts. And so that's kind of what always amazed me, because once you do that, you are offering
Mm.
essentially an unlicensed product onshore, which is just like
Yeah.
you're just opening up the gates to invite the regulators to come in and take a look at what you're doing.
Mm.
Because if you're running it offshore is one thing, it's a bit more, there's a few more barriers regulators have to go through to
Yeah.
contact you and get things, but you're like doing it on their home turf. Like, it was something for someone who had so much money at their
Yeah.
disposal. They could have gotten the best consultants, the best people in the industry, and it appears that they didn't. Which
Mm-hmm.
again, I think comes back to like the flaw of the prop space, which is people treat it first and foremost and purely as an e-commerce business. So,
Yeah.
they think, oh, well, we'll do a hack, we'll open up a brokerage, which is a
Mm-hmm.
very suspicious thing, because you could only join the brokerage if you'd been paid out from the prop firm side of it, which was very
Yeah.
strange. So they weren't even taking new clients, which I don't know what the strategy was there. But
Mm.
and look, this is all just my opinion, of course. Like, I'm not like a lawyer or have like legal experience with US financial law, so
Yeah.
take it with a grain of salt. But yeah, I just think that the way they went about setting up that brokerage just crossed. Well, it wasn't right to do in general. You shouldn't be taking the US traders, but even the way
Mm-hmm.
they then did it just made it so easy for people to come and attack them, and it's
Agreed.
now held up in courts, and it's a huge mess.
Agreed. And why do you think most, like, most of the offshore brokers go to just one island, that is SVG, Saint Vincent and Grenadines? Even the broker I was working with, they were registered in SVG, and more specifically one address. You know, so why do you think that most offshore brokers prefer SVG compared to other islands?
Yeah,
And
look,
even I.
and look, I always say to people, look, being offshore isn't inherently a bad thing. Like, I think that, people view offshoring as like trying to circumvent rules and do dodgy things. But ultimately, like, I think that there are benefits that traders can get through trading with these entities. Again, just
Mhm.
generally speaking, if they're after certain trading conditions and other things. But I think what I always say to people is, if you are joining an offshore entity, look at the larger corporate group structure. Is it just an offshore entity or an offshore broker that, doesn't have any face to the business, is only asking for crypto deposits? Okay, that's looking a bit dicey. But really, there's if you look at a lot of the largest brokers in the world, a lot of them do run entities offshore. Whether that's there's a variety of them, such as Bahamas or SVG, Saint
Mhm.
Lucia. A lot of them do that, and that's for a greater sense of flexibility.
Yeah,
But I would always look for, if people are running an offshore business, are they providing onshore benefits, is what I always say, because a great broker will do that. You see brokers that are regulated in the UK, in Europe, in Australia, in a variety of places. They have an offshore entity, and
I
most of the
agree.
time, a lot of the benefits you give people onshore,
Yeah,
the benefits you give people onshore when it comes to trading conditions, items like that, are very much reflected in the offshore experience as well.
yeah,
It's just to offer greater flexibility to the traders downstream. But again, if it's purely just an offshore entity with nothing else going for it, that could be a bit of a red flag.
I agree.
Specifically SVG, which you brought up.
Mhm.
Look, again, it comes down to flexibility, ease of operations, and a range of other things as to why
Mhm.
I think a lot of brokers and people find it popular. But again, it's good to take a step back, look at the whole picture of a business. If it's purely just an SVG and you can't link it to anyone else anywhere,
Yeah,
yeah, it's questionable. But if it's linked to a larger corporate group doing activity, globally, it's very likely that they're doing it for a greater sense of flexibility at the end of
agreed.
the day. So
Agreed.
again, things generally speaking, I think traders should be on the lookout for.
Mhm. And by the way, have you ever traded with any prop firms?
Yes, I have. As much as I've made a lot of my business to work at brokers, work at prop firms, and work in the trading space. From time to time, I still do manage to get some actual trading in. To very
So,
mixed results, I'll be brutally honest. Like, I'm one of those people that look, I don't like trade for a career or anything because obviously I've devoted myself more to the business side of this industry, but I still love to do
yeah,
it for personal enjoyment. So
and
I'd say that I'm kind of not allowed to trade with a lot of prop firms because as soon as
mhm,
they see the name on a payout and search me on LinkedIn, like a lot of them sort of have like a no competitor clause buried deep in their terms and conditions. But
yeah.
yes, to answer the question, I still, I have been trading with prop firms.
And have you ever got your payout denied?
No comment. Yeah, so obviously I bring up that exact clause in terms and conditions because that may or may not have been the reason that was used to deny my payout. But I think I went in with the expectation that was likely to happen.
Mhm.
So yeah, it does make it a bit hard to trade with prop firms whilst working in the industry at the same time. But again, not here to call anyone out. Like, I think it's all part of business at the end of the day. So
Mhm.
it wasn't negatively impacting me. But I do know the experience that traders can go through when it comes to payout denial.
What's the most weirdest rule you ever saw or ever faced with any prop firm?
It's tough because I did a lot of consulting for a long time. And look, I can't name one off the top of my head, but as the space grew very rapidly, I found people coming up with just like the craziest challenges. Like, I think my thing with prop firms is like, look, it's good to have rules and to be able to have a comprehensive set of parameters, but you still have to
Yeah.
keep it largely simple for people. And great trading, I do think, is very simple at the end of the day. Like,
Mhm.
but I worked with some people. I consulted with a lot of people that would be doing like these really out there rules and things like that. Or it wasn't even consulting. I just talked to people in the industry looking to start a prop firm, and
Mhm.
you'd have people that would make these really crazy like 5-step challenges with like, oh, but if you fail step if you fail phase 3 but get under 4%, you revert back to stage 2, but then your profit target drops to 3% instead of 5%. And, I'd be on these calls and you'd be like, I've been working in the space for 3 years and I have no idea how that challenge works. How is like an end consumer trader? They're going to go on the site and read it and be like, what? But the funny thing
I
is like all the, like these it was so funny because people will be like, this is going to change the industry. It's going to be game changer, this challenge. And it's like,
nothing.
yeah, 10-step challenge. Like the
I
rules are like this long and you're
the
like that's doesn't make any sense, So
I
like I found a lot of these kind of things when I was talking to very like entrepreneurial people in the prop space. Look, in terms of trading with prop firms, it's hard because I've seen like over
yeah.
100 rule sets, terms and conditions, so I couldn't name one off the top of my head.
You know,
But yeah,
you
sorry.
know, one weird rule that I recently saw. So I received a complaint on my website. So basically, there is a prop firm. I won't name them, but basically they provide you the leverage of 1:100. Okay, but once you are funded, you are still going to have 1:100 as your leverage, but you are not allowed to use more than 30% of your margin,
Yeah,
and
and
you
that
have to
that to
calculate.
me is a PR
You
thing, marketing trick. Because in my opinion, no firm should give. If a firm gives you 1 to 200 leverage, I would see that as such a red flag because that is so unsustainable, like
and
long term. But also, then when they say things like, okay, it's 1 to 200 leverage, but you can't use this much margin, it's like, well, why not just change the leverage to like
down.
make it, because that's
Yeah,
just you're saying 1 to 200, but then it's not really 1 to 200.
yeah, and
Um,
you have to calculate margin every time. Like you have to sit down and calculate. Okay, I am taking 5 lots. Is it within my 30% limit of the margin or not? Because even if you take like 31% of the margin limit, you are done. You won't get the payout.
Yeah,
So
it's sort of strange, those kind of rules. Like I don't know, when it comes to like prop firms and things like that, really high leverage is just like it's a massive red flag for me to a large degree. Or the biggest red flag I think is, like I said before, it's when people treat it purely as an e-commerce business. So I think when you
yeah,
see the 50% off sales, buy one get one free, those ones are red flags. And I'll tell you why, because you got these firms here saying to their traders, make sure you exercise good risk management, good risk reward ratio. We're all about that. But then meanwhile, they're saying, cool, buy one, get another account for free, 50%
yeah,
off. And I'm like, hang on a minute. Like, how does that work? Because you're willing to take on more exposure for the same, level of income, or, twice the exposure for the same level of income. That doesn't really make like fiscal sense, or that wouldn't work
agreed.
in trading. So how are you doing that in running your business? Like it's completely contradictory. So I don't know, when you see all I get it. At the end of the day, people need to do promotions, they do giveaways, they do things like that. I think that's a great thing about the space, but I think some people take it to like the next level, and that is the race to the bottom. Like I go on some prop websites and it's like, when you go on like those like fast fashion clothing sites and there's just like rolling banners like sale expiring in 10 minutes, buy now, 50% off and stuff. And it's like I'm being attacked by pop-ups and things, and I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, this doesn't sit well with me. But yeah, that's to me those are the biggest red flags. But yeah, I think rules that rule doesn't even make sense, even from like a risk perspective for the firm, because it's like it would just be simpler to give people
Hmm.
lower leverage from the get-go and not confuse
Yeah.
them so they can actually measure their margin adequately. But they want to be able to advertise 1 to 200 leverage, so that's purely just they want the marketing, but they don't want to actually take the risk on what they're promising traders. So I mean that's
Agreed.
my 2 cents on it ultimately.
And at the end, they just want to deny maximum traders payout.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the elephant in the room, but I'll let you and the people watching come to that conclusion.
Yeah, but it's pretty hard because even we try our best to educate most of the people out there, but at the end, we can't stop everyone from buying with these scam firms, right?
Yeah, look, I mean, ultimately, I get it, like, because the space is very large, and I think it's a lot larger than we sometimes think. Like, sometimes it's easy to have that tunnel vision, and I spend so much time on prop Twitter, and I think to myself, like, everyone on prop Twitter thinks this, therefore the whole industry thinks this. But prop Twitter is still a very niche part of even the whole prop space, as much as I
Mhm.
think it's an important influencing factor. So like even though like everyone on Twitter might be shouting that this firm is a scam or is doing wrong by its traders, and they're right, there is like a huge like group of people out there that don't see that only see the marketing. Like same with education, like your site, like Trusted
Mhm.
Prop does tell people, like unlisted firms or things to watch out for. But again, not everyone out there buying a prop challenge does the research or, takes,
Agreed.
10 minutes to Google and look through the comparison sites such as yours. They just see the ad, they think it's cool, it appeals to them. They see the 50% off, the
Agreed.
site with everything giving them all this value, and they just dive on in. And I think like, yeah, it's hard to see those people existing when you're really like
Mhm.
tuned in with what people in the space are saying and what the sites
Mhm.
are talking about. But I think it's about just us taking responsibility to have as much reach as possible and do the best job we can, as whether it's members of the community, you running a comparison site, me running a prop firm,
Yeah.
just trying to maximize reach with education, to try and
Agreed.
diminish those interesting players, we'll call them, from how
Yeah.
they operate.
Agreed. And by the way, can you share some insights about the challenge details of Blueberry Funded?
Looks more's going to be revealed. Obviously, in our launch is in 2 days, but over the next 2 days, we're going to be doing some social posts talking about the challenges and the things that we're offering as part of it. Look, I think there's gonna be a lot of things that people are very happy with in these. Look, we are coming in to be competitive, but very sustainable and risk adjusted at the same time. So, look, don't expect a 50% discount, or don't expect 1 to 200
Yeah.
leverage.
So
So yeah, we definitely are not interested in taking on a lot of the gamblers, even if it means you know even if it meant making a quick dollar from the sale of people that come in and blow an account. Like, we're not interested
mhm.
in those sort of conditions. But I think price wise, we're coming in very competitive, and I think there's some really great benefits to the challenges, which will
Mhm.
be revealed in time.
I have just three questions. Okay. How many types of challenges are you going to offer?
Sure. So we have three types of challenges. So we have a one-step challenge, we have a two-step challenge, and we're offering what we're calling a rapid challenge. So that's more of a fast-tracked way to funding, on a bit more of a risk-adjusted parameters.
And will you allow copy trading
Between trading accounts owned by the same
between
user,
self
yes.
self accounts? Like, yeah, I'm
Self
trading.
accounts.
Okay. And last thing is, uh, what's your is it balance based drawdown or equity based?
So we're doing balance-based drawdown.
Okay, done. I think people should get the idea about your challenges from these three questions. Like,
Fantastic.
what's different between your firm and other brokers firm?
Fantastic.
So
We're really excited to release this, and I think the important thing is, like, look, the challenges, they're not static. Like, our offering is going to be quite dynamic. The firm we are in the first week is going to be different to the second month, third month, and so
yeah.
yeah, join the Discord, give us feedback, let us know how you like to trade, and if there's a way we
Mhm.
can offer some challenge or some parameter in a sustainable, risk-adjusted way, we're more than happy to take it on and fit it into our pipeline over the long term.
Yeah. Who do you think is your real competitor? Is it the existing firms or the new brokers coming into prop space? Who is your real competitors?
It's kind of tough. I would say to an extent it's partly both. As I said before, we're trying to sort of be that meet in the middle solution that does what brokers do well and prop firms do well. So in that sense, like, uh, we're not looking at all the brokers entering the space as direct competitors. I think they're trying to, again, a lot of brokers are just coming in offering prop trading to their existing client base, or maybe using their existing brand name to sort of target the same people they do on the brokerage side. So I don't see them as competitors. Like, as much as this is an extension of the Blueberry, group of brands, look, we are trying to stand out in our own way and really exist within the prop community. So it's hard to answer the question, but I would say it's a mixture of both. There's a few sort of key firms that I think we've looked at in terms of offering demographics that we see as our main competitors, and without naming them, a few of those are broker backed firms, and a few of them are just traditional prop firms.
Mm-hmm. So, are you afraid of brokers coming into space, prop space?
Um, as I said before, like, I think a lot of brokers are underestimating how the space works, and I think they get in for some rude awakenings in some ways. But we actually
Mm-hmm.
welcome it. Like, I welcome people coming in, one, because I think I don't view all of them as competitors for the reasons I just said.
Yeah.
But also, it's only going to work to legitimize the space more. Like, we're coming into the very strong broker backed
And,
prop firm message. But the more people that come in with that same message only really strengthens what we're trying to
yeah.
offer and brings the industry up as a whole. I'm
Mhm.
just excited to be that sort of best of both worlds offering, which I hope can be a step ahead of the other broker backed
Yeah.
firms. But
You know,
we'll see how we go.
I know so far there are 15 plus brokers who are already into the prop space, and I'm talking about the regulated brokers, not about unregulated ones. And then I am already in discussions with more than 25 brokers, regulated brokers, who are going to jump into this space. So, how do you think this will shape the whole industry? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and my experience reflects that too, because in the last 9 months, even before coming on board with BlueBerryFunded, and even now, every second, third broker I talk to says, we're going to start our own prop firm up. So that's going to be a reality, whether I like it or not. I mean, I do like it because it's only going to legitimize the space further.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I think it's good for the industry as a whole. Because I think if these players are there, they have relationships with regulators, they have strong compliance teams. If regulation comes in, they're in a good position to work with the regulators to maybe even help shape the regulation, do consulting on
Yeah.
it. But then if the regulation does get put into place, they're the best people to then take it on and legitimize the industry even further. I would say, look,
Mm-hmm.
if you put a gun to my head and said, what's the downside of it? Which again, I think is what I said before, which is that, I think a lot of them, again, I think a lot of them don't really understand maybe what they're getting themselves involved in, because I think they see it as an extension of a brokerage in how the business operates. And there's a lot of similarities, of course, but I think
Yeah.
the parts of it that are different to brokerage may be a bit of a rude awakening for them, and they're going to learn some fast lessons. But there's a lot of brokers out there that are very flexible, and will be able to pull through. But I'm interested to see sort of what that response looks like in the next 6 to 12 months. But ultimately, it's a good thing for the space, and yeah, looking forward to seeing more people get involved.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, you might be knowing this. There is this whole controversy around prop firms having their in-house tech and prop firms outsourcing their tech. I know many of the brokers, almost 80% of the brokers, outsource their technology to a third-party provider. I know many providers for brokers. So, what are your thoughts? Like, should you really consider this thing, prop firm having their in-house tech while purchasing a challenge, or if you are a new prop firm trader, or there is
So
something?
I don't think
Mhm.
there's a silver bullet answer to this question, and not even just for prop firms doing third party tech, but in general, in house versus third party tech for any industry or in FX in general. Like this whole debate of in house versus white label or third party tech, it started from some prop firms being shut down at the start of the year by a tech provider, and everyone feeling that it it gives
It's
the tech
wrong.
provider too much control over the space.
Hmm.
Um, but at the same time, like it's kind of tough because if you have all in-house technology, people say, oh, if you have in-house technology, you have more control over it, so you're less likely to be shut down. There's some merit to that opinion, but also I'd say, well, if you have complete control over your own technology, it
No.
also gives you the freedom and flexibility to do whatever you want with it. So that could mean that you build a great product and use it for good. Or if you're running something malicious, a rug pull or a scam, no one will stop you. And that's sort of the thing as well, is that it's a tough space because like people look at the scam firms and they say, oh, why did no one shut them down? Why did no one say anything? But then you see some firms that, I'm not making comments on them being, good or bad or not, but then you see some firms be shut down by a tech provider or by a payment provider, and they're like, oh, these guys are playing the role of executioner. They shouldn't be able to shut these firms down. And so it's a double edged sword. Look, I'd say that the ironic thing is, so everyone talks about in house tech a lot. So they're saying, oh, they're using in house tech or white label tech. But ultimately, all the trading platforms that any prop firm uses, bar a few maybe, is all third party white label tech. Like all the trading
I agree.
platforms are not owned and operated. So it's one of those ones where so much of the forex space like is just built off third party technology, the trading platforms, the trading hubs, trading bridges to stream
Yeah.
up, to get upstream liquidity down to the traders, all third party, the connection to the
Yeah.
banks, like even a lot of liquidity providers are third parties. a
They
lot of a
agreed.
lot of brokers don't have the money, technology, expertise to connect to a prime
Mm-hmm.
broker, so they use a prime liquidity provider who is essentially doing
Yeah.
that connection to the banks for you, and essentially almost like a wholesaler of liquidity. So that in a way is almost outsourcing your liquidity management. And
I
80-90% of retail brokers use that
I
on
agree.
account basis. So,
I agree.
yeah,
I agree with
I,
you. I have worked with Alchemy Prime. as they were providing liquidity for one of the brokers that I was working, and we had like everything outsourced aside from the tech part, that is managing, that's the CRM. We had everything outsourced, like literally
Yeah,
99% things.
and it's tough because it comes down to, even if you do build it in house, like maybe you build it in house, but you might not build good technology in house. Like I've seen
Agreed.
a lot of brokers out there. It's kind of funny, they have like dev teams of 30, 40, 50 plus people, and everything they build in house is like cost them 20 times more than something they could have just got off the shelf. And
Mhm.
so it's one of those, and it doesn't give a lot of benefits to traders. So I'd say there's no one size fits all answer to that question. I think there's times where in-house tech is really good for businesses and good for the traders. There's times where it doesn't make a lot of sense and isn't giving a lot of benefit downstream. But I think you can
Yeah.
only answer the question in so much as the broker, the prop firm, the situation.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's sort of my final thoughts on it. To be completely transparent, so when it comes to BlueBerryFunded and our technology, obviously we back a lot of things onto the Blueberry Markets infrastructure. So their trading bridge, liquidity connections, and things like that. So we work quite closely with their team on that.
Mhm.
But when it comes to the actual prop firm, CRM dashboard, we sort of have a hybrid where we have a custom build on a third party piece of tech. So I'd like to think that
Yeah.
gives us a bit of the best of both worlds. We have a degree of
Agreed.
control over it. Um, but at the same time, like there is someone else essentially, able to, preside over it and do a lot of like the heavy lifting in terms of development and work
Mhm.
like that. And that's allowed us to get to market faster, but still gives us a large degree of flexibility. So it really
Mhm.
depends on the situation in how you answer that question.
Mhm. And by the way, you know, which kind of traders do you guys prefer? Like, as Blueberry funded, like since you have your own experience with brokerage part also, so which type of traders do you prefer? Scalpers, day traders, swing traders, and why?
Yeah, it's tough because so we haven't gone live yet, so I haven't really seen the pool of data on the traders and how that works on Blueberry's conditions, the liquidity, pricing, and things like that. So I can't definitively answer it yet, to be honest. But look,
Mhm.
historically, it's kind of tough because really what you look for is consistency in traders. I mean, obviously they come to the live environment, they're on simulated capital. It goes without saying, but in terms of how you use those traders for upstream, dynamic hedging or as signal providers, look,
Mhm.
again, hard question to answer because you might, off a certain set of pricing and certain group of clients, say, oh, it's day traders, and on another one say it's swing traders. But look,
Yeah.
ultimately, I would say that the one that is the most inconsistent probably is scalping. I'd say a lot of scalping strategies tend to, they're not sustainable in the sense that once you try to scale them volume wise, there's not enough
Agreed.
liquidity in the book to give you the same fills. So the returns are diminishing on them. So if you're using
Agreed.
traders signals upstream, the scalpers
Mhm.
are probably the ones that are going to, their strategy is going to scale the worst and probably be the most unsustainable. Um,
Yeah.
Again, then you look at swing traders and say like very different, but yeah, they don't have those same pitfalls as scalpers when you're going to use them as signals, but then you're placing a lot more concentration risk because obviously holding over longer periods of time means you have
Mhm.
to wait a lot longer to sort of source data to build models off them and things like that. But again, like, yeah, it's a hard question to answer. I feel like I'm not going to give a proper one, in a few
Yeah.
minutes on this
All
podcast.
All right. And by the way, recently we have seen many firms, as you said, that my forex funds was having like more than $200 million liquidity, like they were having cash in their bank account, right? And we have seen many firms recently crossing $500 million in revenue. And I believe one of the legend firms, FTMO, might also be having more than, you know, $500 million in revenue overall since their launch. So, do you think firms are getting bigger than brokers now?
Oh, there's definitely firms out there that are bigger than brokers. Like you said at the start of the call, it's like there's 48,000 brokers out there. Like, if you want to say how many of those do less than 50 million a year in turnover, it is quite a lot of them, to be honest.
Yeah.
And so I could say with certainty that there are prop firms out there that are bigger than brokers because with the number of brokers and the way a lot of them operate, there's a lot of them that aren't that big. Look, in
Right.
terms of prop firms overtaking tier one level brokers in terms of turnover, um, yeah, I would say I would say some of the big ones, some of the big, top five prop firms have overtaken in terms of yearly revenue, some of the, top tier brokers for sure, like without naming names or anything. And again, it's a different
Yeah,
kind of revenue in terms of how like a Forex broker book works, versus sort of the
agreed.
sales and hedging activity and things of a prop firm. So it's not a like for like comparison, but I
Mm,
would definitely say that that's happening. Well, that's another reason why brokers are moving into prop firms. Like it's the
yeah,
value's there. There are traders out there that would rather trade with a prop firm than a broker for the stage of their trading journey that they're at. So brokers have seen that. It's not just a bunch of e-commerce influencers, online. Starting prop firms, they're very serious, large businesses
yeah,
that have been able to scale quite quickly and are now also moving into the brokerage space. So that's something brokers are probably taking note of as well, that some of the top prop firms are getting brokerage licenses. So if these guys are jumping over and taking some of your business, then you want to be
agreed.
playing in all fields and all markets as well as a brokerage.
And by the way, what's the one thing that you think brokers can copy from the prop space? You know, like something that brokers can copy from the prop space, props industry.
Yeah, whether it's starting their own prop firm or even running their broker, I think in community engagement. And I think it's something that it's what drew me to prop firms originally too, because, I really liked a lot. And I think it comes borrowed kind of from the crypto space. You have these discords, you have people on Twitter, you have people openly talking about the industry. Like if 5 years ago there was someone on Twitter talking about, oh, this broker's doing this, or I don't like this about that broker, or, talking about like the people that run brokerages on a personal level, like no one would have cared. Like it's not something that would have appealed to people. But now, for good and bad reasons, it can get a bit toxic at times. But like prop
Yeah.
Twitter is like such an engaging thing where like even as someone who's worked at brokers and works at prop firms, I look at and throughout the last 2 months, even building BlueBerryFunded, people have made points on there about what they'd like in a prop firm or what other prop firms do. And it's made me stop and think,
Mhm.
oh, should I be doing it this way with BlueBerryFunded? Like, that's actually really good to see that opinion out there. I think brokers
Mhm.
can learn a lot from this and how they engage with the community and realize that I think the difference with brokers, and I understand, look, they're regulated, they have to be compliant, there's certain requirements they need to adhere to, but I think they need to stop seeing themselves as like this, company client dynamic all the time and
Yeah.
realize that, their traders are ultimately, kind of like their partners to an extent. As much as, the traders are the people that they are their clients, the users earning them revenue. It's, if you view
Yeah.
them on like an equal playing field and you listen to what they have to say, what they want in like, in trading and in the business you're running, it's only going to serve
Yeah.
both of you better in the long term. So I think
Agreed.
that's something props have done so well in the last few years and why they do so successfully because they built a product that traders love and traders continue to want.
Yeah.
Whereas I think brokers have stepped back a bit and just kind of keep offering the same thing. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think that's what brokers can learn from
And
props.
what's the one thing that prop firms can copy from brokers or learn from brokers?
Yeah, I think I'd say risk management, but not just like forex, like um, like book risk management or exposure risk management, but also I would
Hmm.
say like redundancies and things like that. Because I think what we've learned in the last 6 months is prop firms, their platform gets shut down and they're like, okay, so we're offline for a month. And I find that this is a thing that shows how much people love these brands and this product because they a month later come back online and keep trading with this prop firm. If that was
Hmm.
a broker said, sorry, like we've had a mishap, we're offline for a month, they'd probably just shut down, to be honest. They would lose trust of
Yeah.
all the traders because they don't have a community or that personal involvement, I think, with a large pool of traders or a group
Hmm.
of people in the trading community. So I think, but that being said, like I think, yeah, prop firms need to sort of have a lot of backups in place. The same with payments. Like they lose a credit card provider or something goes wrong and they're like, oh, well, we're not taking payments on this. And I'm sitting there being
Yeah.
like, a broker's got 3 or 4 backup payment providers. They have multiple trading platforms, multiple,
Agreed.
backup servers in case there's a crash or something. I
Yeah.
think that level of professional technology management isn't there on the prop side. But
Hmm.
again, I think the industry's finding its feet. I think it's something that will happen naturally in firms. Even in the last 6 months, we've seen get better at it. Like I think if
Agreed.
there's firms out there, if one of their trading platforms went down today or they lost it or who knows what will happen, they have backups. And
Yeah.
so I think they've learned from that mistake. But I think there's still a long
Hmm.
way to go in the prop space with that sort of longer term risk managed view of running a
Hmm.
business.
And why do you think that MetaTrader pulled back from the prop space?
Look, I can't say for certain. To be honest, look, I think that the way it was being operated, they didn't necessarily have a large degree of oversight on, because I think a lot of the firms that were operating, within a broker's infrastructure weren't, in direct contact with MetaTrader. So I think they didn't have they weren't able to communicate with these firms directly and understand how they were operating and what they were doing. So I would completely understand from where MetaQuotes was coming from to say, well, we don't really want this kind of activity going on. They want to,
Mm-hmm.
have direct contact with the firms that are using their software, that are promoting this to the world, and sort of be able to have that line of communication. So, I mean, I'm sure there's a
Yeah.
myriad of reasons, and they came to a very sound internal decision on it. But that's sort of my take on it. And it makes sense. And I think it's better for the industry long term. I mean, yeah, it was a bit of a disruption, but
Mm-hmm.
I think
I
ultimately
agree.
we want to make sure the firms that are offering platforms are authorized to do so by the main platform provider.
Yeah.
And it means that not just anyone can set up a prop firm, overnight. It means that, they have to be vetted, go through a proper procedure with MetaQuotes, or even other platform providers for that matter,
Mm-hmm.
and, make sure they're doing the right things. Again, I think that comes back to the previous question, where there is power in things being third party operated. It's not always good. There's downsides, but I think it's good, because if there's a major
Mm-hmm.
platform in the space that, vets people and says, yes or no to them coming on board, it's more than likely they're going to say no to people that are very dodgy or don't have a good corporate entity set up, or onshore operations, or things like that. And it's ultimately a good thing for the space. But yeah, that's sort of my 2 cents on the MetaQuote situation.
And you also know, and even I know that none of the brokers are going to offer MetaTrader to prop firms, right? After the recent changes. So how are these firms right now providing platform for, and what is that platform for that they are providing, and how, like, how is that even possible?
I mean, look, I'm not going to comment on specific firms and, things like
No,
that. I don't
in
look.
generic.
And I think there's different ways a lot of them do this. So again, there's no one size fits all. Look, BlueBerryFunded, we are coming to market through the relationship with Blueberry Markets with MT for an MT5. That
Yeah.
is our goal. But look, for other people that are offering, you'll see Platform 4 and Platform 5. Usually the reason that was always listed on sites was to not imply a direct relationship with MetaTrader. So, because if you put the brand name on the site, it would imply that you have the license or authority to offer that product. So, usually if they're listing it in that way, again, it may imply that they don't actually own that relationship or have the authority. But look, it's hard to say
Mhm.
depending on the firm. But it depends on what method they've gone to offer that service. So you'd have to contact the individual firm directly. But that's kind of just my broad opinion on it.
Mhm. All right. So, but still, do you think is it legal or ethical, like providing platform for?
Um, well, geez, you're really putting me on the spot. Look, it would really depend on the prop firm. I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus on this one. Look, I would just ensure that the firm that you're working with has the proper authority to offer the platforms and has the proper relationship with the platform providers. Whether that's for platform 4 or 5 or C Trader, Match Trader, or anything. I think that's the key point with that, is to make sure they have the proper authority to do that. And look, that's not just for their sake, but it's because, if you have a trading account on that platform and, something goes wrong down the
Mhm.
track, you don't want to lose that account or lose a payout or something because of that.
Agreed.
So I'd always just check with your prop firm, do the research. Like with any firm, not even with this matter, with any matter, it's, just do the research, take a look into
Agreed.
it, and, make sure you're making the right decision.
Mhm. All right. So again, let's end up this podcast, and I hope our viewers enjoyed. They got a lot of value from this whole podcast. And by the way, guys, before ending this podcast, if you are planning to buy any challenge account with Blueberry Funded, use the coupon code Trusted, and you will be getting 10% off with our coupon code. So again, thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much, Marcus, for joining us on this call. And hopefully, our viewers also enjoyed this as much as I did. And also, we can continue this podcast in future if users like this. So, thank you so much,
I'm
Marcus,
ready.
for
I'm
joining
ready
us.
to come back, AJ. I'm keen for round 2. Like, I'm only just getting started.
Yeah. So, and by the way, congratulations, and I am very excited to see what Blueberry Funded brings onto the table. And
So am I. I'm
let's
excited to see what traders think of it, and we're excited for our launch in 2 days. Go to blueberryfunded.com to join the waitlist, or join through the trusted prop. But yeah, very
yeah.
excited for what's to come.
And guys, you can find the Discord link of Blueberry Funded in the description. So it's an exclusive entry if you want. So yeah,
It's
thank you so much, Marcus.
been a pleasure, AJ.